How's it going, everybody? This is Top Dropper. Hope you're having a great day, and welcome back to another video. Alright, it's time for another edition of Gaming Revisits. In this series, I talk about all the games that I have in my collection throughout the PlayStations 1, 2, 3, and 4 that I find to have made a real impact in the video gaming world, or personally some of my favorites. And the game that I'll be reviewing today is called Felony 1179. Now, this game is obviously up there as perhaps one of those that I think I've played the most over the last couple of years. And the reason why I say that is because, you know, there are a lot of games where some say it might be their favorites, but they don't play a whole lot of. And then there are other games in which they really just become addicted to. This is a game that I've just become addicted to ever since I first got this game in December of 2021. And there are plenty of reasons as to why that is the case. So this game was first developed by Climax and was released in 1997 by Yanoman Games, which of course was released in Japan there, and ultimately released worldwide by ASCII Entertainment. And the story is basically really short for its time, but obviously what happens is that you are a driver that is basically on the run trying to get 3 keys to be able to open a casket full of gold that was ultimately sold by a very rich dude. And obviously you're trying to get all of them in a quick amount of time and ultimately get them to the end, so that way he can be able to open the casket and ultimately get all the gold inside it. However, the irony is that the game ends in a very similar fashion to one of those Indiana Jones movies in which the guy's face ultimately gets melted in the very end. It's a very odd game, obviously, but it's one that I've continuously played for the last couple of years for many reasons. Obviously, one of them is because, you know, whenever I'm thinking about playing on the PlayStation 1 for the day, for some reason, this is one of the very few games that really comes on my mind, because obviously one of the things is that it's obviously really quick, but also at the same time, it's just really addicting. There's just so much that's going on for this game, and yet it only happens for such a short amount of time. But I just keep coming back to this because for some reason, I just really enjoy playing this game. And one of the first reasons why, obviously, is the gameplay. Obviously, for a game that only has like 3 missions in it, there is still so much going on in this game. Obviously, the main goal is that you're getting from one point on the map all the way to the very end. And obviously, there are just 3 places that you're going to. There's downtown, there's also Paris, and then ultimately there's another location which I completely forget about. But ultimately, there are 3 maps overall that you're on. And like I said before, you're just getting from one end to the very next in a quick amount of time. There's usually a timer that usually counts down, and ultimately you have to beat that time and also have that object that you're needing from that map with you by the time you get there at the very end of the mission, because otherwise you have to restart the entire mission all over again. But usually it's pretty easy to do because ultimately you're only getting there in a pretty quick amount of time depending on the kind of car that you have. And yeah, there's just so much going on in this game. You know, sometimes the cars might be a little bit harder to control. However, that's really depending on which ones that you ultimately use. Usually most of the time it will be the pickup truck, and sometimes, you know, it can be a little bit of a pain to handle. And sometimes you also have your supercars as well. If you want to take one of those could be a lot faster or ultimately a lot quicker, and ultimately that can help you complete the missions a lot quicker. But again, it really depends on what car that you use. And that's really basically pretty much it. I mean, all you're doing is just driving around, you know, driving through a whole bunch of objects and ultimately getting your key to help with unlocking the casket of gold and ultimately getting to the very end. It's usually very simple, and I really like that. I mean, I feel like that, you know, like those are real simple, quick, and straight to the point. I definitely feel like that those are the kinds of missions that are really helpful to be able to really help give the best satisfaction for completing the game. And ultimately, I feel like they did that here with this game. Now, granted, the fact that there's only 3 missions in this game overall is definitely a little disappointing, but ultimately though, it's again pretty simple. You know, there's not really much to it, and ultimately that's how I like it. I definitely wish there could have been a little more, but ultimately, you know, what matters in this game is that it is enjoyable. And for me, I think the gameplay definitely excels at that. But one of the other things about this game that's really unique is basically all the carnage that you get to create, and that's basically the next reason why I think this game is so enjoyable. It's all of the destruction that you get to cause in the streets of Tokyo, Paris, and ultimately downtown. I definitely feel like that, you know, with all the things that are going on in this game, you get to do a whole ton of damage. But it really, again, all depends on the kind of cars that you usually have. You know, ultimately, the pickup truck is probably your best weapon to be able to take the most amount of damage without ultimately stopping. But again, you get to drive through a whole bunch of things. You get to drive through a whole bunch of police cars, a whole lot of other objects, like for example stands and maybe even telephone phone booths and all that stuff. Heck, there may even be some bicycles and some other objects that you ultimately end up being run over as well. The more damage that you do in the overall mission, the more money that you rack up at the very end of the game. That's right, at the end of each mission, there's ultimately a damage counter, which really evaluates how much money that you owe to the state because of all the damage that you cause. And like I said before, the more cars that you wreck and the more damage that you cause to property, ultimately that number is going to rise. So while ultimately the main goal is to get all the way to the very end with that important key that you need, it really helps to cause a whole lot of destruction in the wake of it as well, right? I definitely really enjoy it. I mean, obviously, I would prefer to be such a clean driver, obviously, whenever I'm playing games and stuff like that. But hey, you know, sometimes there are games in which you really get to enjoy causing a whole lot of destruction. And this is one of those right here. May I say that it was a little too excessive? Probably. But hey, you know what? It is definitely enjoyable to watch, and I enjoy the chaos that happened whenever I was playing in all these missions. Now, there was one complaint that I heard that you couldn't get to run all the pedestrians and all that stuff. Well, considering that you probably would have expected this game to be Grand Theft Auto or something like that, I'm kind of wondering what would have happened if we actually had that kind of thing in this game. Obviously, I don't want to know, but either way, I'm just making that point right there. The next thing, obviously, are all the cars and all the maps. Now, like I said before, there are mostly 3 missions overall, which means only 3 maps, but I think there may be some more than that, obviously. But ultimately, the car selection is obviously what really gets the game going. Your main vehicle, obviously, is that Dodge working truck that you have, which the driver ultimately plays throughout the entire game if you choose to do so. But again, you also have a bunch of supercars, you have a bunch of sedans, and a whole bunch of other cars. Heck, there's even an open wheel car as well. And before every mission, you get to tune your cars up as well to see exactly how much you can get out of it before each and every mission. I definitely like the cool car selection that you ultimately get in the course of this game. Obviously, it has to go through a whole bunch of hours just to be able to complete this game, so that way you can unlock every single one of those cars and ultimately unlock every single map there is in this game. And usually for a game that only has like a 3 mission story mode, for being able to get all the other cars and also all the other maps in this game, it does take a little bit longer than that. But hey, as long as you're doing that, you're able to get a real good fleet of cars that you can use whenever you decide to ultimately replay the game. Now ultimately, again, you have to decide between whether or not you want to have an automatic transmission or a manual transmission. I usually prefer automatic transmission because that's absolutely easier. But again, there are some cars as well in which you ultimately may have to refuel because they burn a whole lot of fuel as well, and that's pretty unfortunate. But hey, there is a gas station sometimes in the middle of the mission, so if you're running low, you can just drive right through it and ultimately refuel your car, and that should help you get to the end of the mission. Ultimately, if you're driving a Dodge, you're good to go, obviously. You're able to get through the very end without having to worry about fuel. And there are a couple of other mechanics as well that you can use to be able to make these cars real sleek, but ultimately, it does have a pretty decent car selection. You know, there's mostly about like 20 cars, I think, overall in the game, and then however many amount of maps there is, ultimately, the more time that you spend in this game, the more you'll be able to collect all of them, and ultimately, that is definitely a rewarding experience if you're able to get all of them, because trust me, it may not take very long for you to be able to do that. Then there are graphics, and to be honest with you, I feel like they're pretty much what you would expect during a PlayStation 1 game in 1997. Obviously, this game was designed by a Japanese company, first off, so obviously, you know, the graphics in this game will probably going to look a lot different than what you usually see when an American company would develop a PlayStation 1 game in 1997. Now, the odd part about this is that Climax is actually planning to design this game for the Sega Saturn, but considering all the things that they would have to go through to be able to do that, they ultimately decided that building it for the PlayStation 1 will obviously be the best route, and I definitely can understand why. I don't know if the game would have been that better if there was a Sega port for this game, but hey, you know, for the PlayStation 1, I definitely feel like they did the best they could in regards to making the game look realistic. Now, there obviously may be a little blurriness at times as well. In fact, some of the characters that you will usually see outside the truck as well, you know, you can barely really see much of them as well, and ultimately, some of the options that you will see as well, you know, they may look a little stale in comparison to most of the other things that you will see in the game. But again, you know, this was 1997. This was only the 3rd year of the PlayStation 1's existence, obviously, and by this time, you know, pretty much everybody has really gotten the hand of being able to make the graphics worth it for each of the PlayStation 1 games, and I feel like that, you know, they really did the best they could, and I think they did pretty alright for, you know, their sake and all the development that they ultimately went through with it. Could it have been better? Absolutely. I definitely feel like, you know, there was a little fuzziness at times ultimately, and, you know, obviously it looked more arcade-like than it usually would be, but ultimately though, you know, the style of it is what is important, and ultimately I did feel like that I was really enjoying all the carnage and all of that stuff, and so I do feel like I will give them a little bit of a pass in regards to the graphics, but they did look pretty alright from what I was looking at. And yeah, those are basically the main things that I really enjoyed about this game. In regards to the flaws and disappointments, I mean, obviously the main one is that, obviously like I said before, there are really only just 3 missions in this entire game. That is a very short time to be able to complete a story mode, and if you're lucky enough, you may even beat the game literally in just under 20 minutes in regards to the story mode. It's definitely a little bit disappointing from my view. I definitely would have liked to have seen more missions in this game. Obviously, the sequel to this game will ultimately get some more missions and all that stuff, but hey, you know, like 3 missions, obviously, as much fun as it is definitely a little disappointing in my view. I definitely would have liked to have seen a more expansive story mode than what we got. And also, while I definitely enjoyed, you know, the surf rock soundtrack, it definitely didn't feel anything like what you usually see out of a car chase video game. You know, the games like Grand Theft Auto and Driver and all that stuff, I don't know, it definitely felt like that you were more in some sort of action-packed racing game than it was an actual car chase game. I definitely didn't enjoy the soundtrack that much, but the surf rock though, it definitely felt really entertaining. And finally, obviously, one of the main things is that ultimately, the more times that you play this game, obviously, like I said before, because of how short it is, you ultimately do get bored every once in a while. It definitely feels more like a chore than it is something that you just get to sit around and really just enjoy playing. I mean, ultimately, you know, because of how short this game is, players ultimately will wonder if there's really any real sense of enjoyment of continuing to play this game anymore. Obviously, that's not with me, but ultimately, that could be the case with others. So yeah, I definitely wish there could have been a lot more to help make this game enjoyable for others, but for me, hey, I definitely enjoy it because I keep playing this game literally every single year or so. Why the heck with it? I definitely enjoy this game. Now in Japan, they call this game Roundabout, but here in America, they call it Felony 1179, and for a very short game, this is one of those games that I personally enjoy, and probably one of my all-time favorite PlayStation 1 games because of all the action, all the chaos, and ultimately all the destruction that you go through just to be able to get every single one of the keys and ultimately beat this game. And while the ending is definitely a little bit disappointing, I still get a kick out playing this game every single time I put it into PlayStation 1 because there is so much that's going on, you know. You really just feel the adrenaline rush of excitement and chaos, and ultimately that's exactly why I keep coming back to this game every single time because I definitely feel like that is really addicting. It really depends on how much you personally will enjoy this game, but to me, I personally enjoy it quite a bit. Felony 1179 is ultimately one of my favorite PlayStation 1 games, and ultimately is another good game that I have in my collection for all of those reasons. Even though it is short, for me, it is definitely worthwhile. Every time I put this disc in the PlayStation 1 console, hey, you can just know that I'm going to enjoy all the chaos that is going to take place in this game. And so that is going to do it for this gaming revisit. Again, this is just one of many games that I have in my collection. I would like to hear from all of you. What other games that I have in my collection that you would like for me to review? Feel free to let me know down in the comments below. I'll play a little bit of it, and ultimately I will give you my review and thoughts on what I think of the game overall when I get to it. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. As always, if you'd like to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when my latest video is released. Comment below for future suggestions for all my videos, whether it's vlogs, flashes, or challenges, you name it, leave it in the comments below and I'll do my best to make them. As always, follow me on my social media, all the links are in the description below. That's going to do it for this video. I hope you're having another great day. Hopefully, if you have the time, go get Felony 1179. Ultimately, it really depends on how much you enjoy it or whether you don't like it, but either way, get this game a chance. Really, I promise you, it is definitely a lot of fun. But either way, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all again in another one very soon. So long, everybody.